All right, well, I want to welcome everyone to NGBS Green, a rigorous, accessible green certification for existing buildings. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. My name's Brett Little. I'm the program manager here, and I will be your moderator today. As always, our course is approved for multiple different continuing education units, as well as our own internal Green Home Institute certified professional. And in the case of this session, it's approved for all 5 pillars of green because it is a green building program. We're also approved under AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Our members are always doing amazing things. This is Joe Madash. He is just learned speaking at the 30th annual Pennsylvania Housing Research Center conference as the keynote. Very cool. Even if you're not in Pennsylvania, you should go there and learn and hear from them. You're going to take away something. And again, if you want to become a member and do amazing things and share those with us so we can share them, you can check that out on our website at greenhomeinstitute.org, become a member. You get instant access to all of our webinars and discounts on certification and education. And before we get started, a huge thanks to our top tier sponsor, April Air. You're going to help your clients stay healthy. You're talking humidity control, temperature control, and air purity. Also, water efficient humidification is a win for both health and water conservation. Energy efficient dehumidification pairs with right size heat pump can keep you the air feeling cool with proper set points and higher energy savings. They have MERV 13 plus filtration, which captures particulates, which is a growing concern with airborne viruses. PM 2.5 coming in from wildfire smoke that affects the entire planet now, unfortunately, VOCs, dust, and more. You can check them out over at aprilair.com and help your clients breathe easier. Also, thanks to our second tier sponsor, Niagara Conservation, we need to get water rates down. That's going to reduce carbon emissions and stop the use of our precious resource of water. And water bills are going up. So we can do that. They have vacuum assisted technology. We can have super low flow toilets. We have glowing reviews from multifamily housing renovation specialists who are only using this technology to get the bills down, to save water. I have them. I've been using them for years personally. It works. It flushes. We can prove it. If you're afraid, that's okay. They have the Liberty, the Sabre, the Shadow, the Baron, and they have a little bit of higher flow rates that are still low flow, still WaterSense certified, still hit the green building targets. Check it out over at niagaraconservation.com. All right. Well, I am super excited to hand it off to our speakers today. And so first of all, I want to welcome Gran Giovagnoli, who is with our member and longtime partners, Eco Achievers. So super excited to have you on, Gran. And welcome back, Cindy Wasser from the Home Innovations Lab. I believe this is like your 3rd or 4th time on. So welcome back. And Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you. So please do take it away.
Great. Thanks for having us, Brett, and thanks for that introduction. And I will reiterate Brett's direction that you need to go see Joe Mendosh. He is excellent. You're going to learn a lot from him. All right. Brett, are you seeing my slides full screen now?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Perfect. Actually, I'm going to, sorry, one second. Screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Thanks for your patience there.
No, now it's your note screen.
Joining us for NGBS Green Rigorous and Accessible Certification for Existing Buildings. I'm really glad that you joined us all today. My name is Cindy Wasser. I'm Senior Manager of Green Building Programs at Home Innovation Research Labs, and I'm joined by Graham Giovagnoli. He's an NGBS Green Verifier, and he's a partner with Eco Achievers. Eco Achievers is a small boutique hands-on green verification company that's based in the Midwest but works across the country. They work on a lot of different green certification programs, and they do a lot of NGBS green certification in part because it's a program that their clients often ask for. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to start with some high-level information about the National Green Building Standard and Home Innovation Certification Program. And then we're going to focus in on the compliance criteria for existing buildings. We'll speak to building eligibility, the overarching requirements and philosophy of that chapter. And then we'll have some specific recommendations for building conversions and historic preservation in particular. And then the latter half of the program today is going to be project examples. Graham's going to walk us through a couple case studies or projects that have been certified and identify what contributed to them earning green certification. So today's presentation focuses on existing buildings and how they can earn NGBS Green Certification. So before we start, a little bit of background. Since the NGBS Green Certification Program launched in 2009, new multifamily buildings have always been the most common type of building seeking certification. However, in the past couple of years, the number of existing residential buildings being renovated or other building types being converted to multifamily and seeking green certification has increased significantly. And there's a couple reasons for this. So first, right now, there are some significant financial incentives for buildings to seek green certification. In particular, the HUD mortgage insurance premium reduction, or MIP, is really pushing a lot of existing buildings to get a green certification when they go for financing. Also, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have preferred financing for green certified buildings, both new and existing, and NGBS Green is a recognized program under all three. Also, there's a number of state housing finance agencies that either incentivize or require green certification as part of their state QAPs. And more are expanding their requirements to be not just specific to new construction, but also apply to rehabilitation as well. Also, there's been many studies that show green certified buildings are valued higher than non-certified buildings. Developers find green buildings easier to market to renters because many of them today are really interested in a more sustainable lifestyle as well as health and wellness. And then finally, both building owners and renters can benefit from lower utility bills from more efficient building design and construction. So right off the bat, we wanted to get you engaged and have a little bit of interactive poll questions. So the first question is, have you ever or are you currently working on an NGBS Green project that was not required to pursue certification as a condition for funding? So we're just curious if you are doing work on NGBS, what's driving it? We'll leave that up, about 20, 30 seconds more, and then we'll take a look at the responses.
Yeah, and I don't know if you'll be able to see the results. If not, I'm happy to read them off.
I don't see any of the results right now, so you can close it out when you think we've got a majority.
Yeah, we're definitely at 70%. So let's give it another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Can you see those?
Yeah, so it looks like about 2/3 are saying no, and 25% are saying yes. So Graham, do you think that this is a surprise to you? Is this similar to the breakdown that you see with the projects you work on?
Hi, everyone. For our projects, they're almost strictly and wholly driven by some type of funding. A lot of the remodel projects, I would say almost all of them, are HUD driven because they're applying for a HUD loan. And the other ones are state tax credit projects. So that's great. I want to talk to those of you who said that you're not pursuing as a condition of funding. I'd love to know why. If you want to put it in the chat.
Great, and that segues really nicely to our next question. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about funding options today, but since we have heard that so many of our green certified projects are being driven by that HUD MIP reduction, we were curious how many of you on the call are familiar with that program. So you can say very familiar, somewhat familiar, or huh? And Brett, just feel free to close that out and share the results when you think we've got majority responses.
And so here again, I'll just touch on, I'm just reading the results. Okay, that makes sense. So oftentimes we get called by developers who might have a later vintage 70s, 80s building or development that was built. They want to do a remodel to for renter retention and spruce the place up, and in the process can take advantage of this mortgage interest premium rate reduction, which is very valuable to them. So a lot of our calls come from developer clients looking for a HUD loan.
Great. And then one final question at this point in time, and that's how familiar are you with the NGBS? You can say expert, fair, or not at all familiar. Let us know, and then we'll dive deeper into the content for today. Okay, so it looks like, you know, you're all in the right place. The majority are split between fair and not at all familiar. So this is a great presentation for you to join because we're going to cover a lot of the basics of the existing buildings pathway. And then about 11% said expert. That's fine. I think even the experts are going to have something to take away from this program because it's focused specifically on existing buildings. All right, so the ICC 700 National Green Building Standard is designed to be a voluntary above code green rating system that covers all residential. Something that sets it apart is the fact that it's ANSI approved, which means that it was developed through a broad consensus development process that involved builders, developers, manufacturers, code officials, government representatives, and more. It's also part of the ICC suite of I codes that form a complete and comprehensive set of building codes in the US. And then given its credibility as that ANSI standard, it's recognized by federal, state, and local agencies, as well as numerous financing agencies and lender partners. So as an ANSI standard, the NGBS is subject to regular review and update. There have been 4 editions that have been published to date. The first version has since been retired. The 2012 version is on its way out. No one can register for certification under that option at this point in time. So right now, the current versions are 2015 and 2020 that are available for certification. So someone might think, okay, I'm just getting started. I should go right to the 2015 because it's based on an earlier code version. So therefore, it must be more accessible, more easy. I'm going to do that. However, I would definitely advise taking a look at both 2015 and 2020. The 2020 was released in June of 2020. And it includes a lot of new certification opportunities and added flexibility that especially benefit existing buildings. So I recommend that people take a look at both and then see what's going to fit best for your project. If it is an existing building, most likely you want to start with the 2020 version. And then at the bottom of the screen, I have a note about the 2024 NGBS. The development process for that is starting soon, and it will last about 18 months or so. If you have any specific ideas or proposed changes to the standard, or you're interested in becoming involved with a task group or committee, send me a note and I'll make sure that you're on the list to get information once it's released. So buildings seeking NGBS Green Certification can earn one of 4 certification levels: bronze, silver, gold, or emerald. And the certification level depends on how many green practices are incorporated and how much more energy and water efficient the building is compared to baseline conditions. Commercial space certification is also available for mixed use buildings. And the commercial space just earns 1 certification level, and that's certified, regardless of what certification level is achieved for the residential portion. I'm not going to talk a lot about the commercial space certification today. I just want to mention it because this was advertised as being for multifamily and mixed use buildings. If you want a deeper dive into the commercial space certification, send me a note and I can direct you to a dedicated training on that. So what makes the NGBS different? So first, the NGBS is written in code language, not so that it can be adopted as code, but so that anyone who picks it up can really quickly, easily understand what's being expected. Given its place in the ICC suite of I codes, the NGBS also includes a lot of references throughout to the IRC, the IBC, and the IECC. And I think that makes it a little bit more accessible for people that are just dipping their toe into green certification, because they can open it up and they'll see references to stuff that they're already familiar with for code compliance, and then they can see how they can build on what they're already doing. The NGBS is also really broad, both in terms of its broad residential scope, as well as its number of practices. So the NGBS covers single family homes, multifamily and mixed use buildings, land development projects, and existing buildings. And it includes over 500 different practices to choose from. So if you're really familiar with that LEED rating system that has 100 credits, you're going to open up the NGBS and be really shocked at the multitude and diverse practices that are available. That means that there's something for everyone. So no matter the construction style or the climate zone or the specific goals of the project team, such as net zero energy or wellness, there's something for everyone that is a meaningful definition of sustainable construction. And then last, I'll note that it's more than a design standard. There are practices for design, construction, verification, and operations and maintenance. So the NGBS can be used for homes, multifamily and mixed use buildings, and land developments. The buildings can be new or planned for renovation. There is no height or size limit. So we've certified both small garden style apartments as well as 88-story high-rise towers outside New York City. As compared to the previous NGBS version, the 2020 NGBS expanded the definition of residential and therefore expanded the range of buildings that can now seek certification. So in general, any place where people live and sleep is within the scope of the NGBS, and that includes assisted living, student housing, hotels, homeless shelters, and more. And for a mixed use building, such as a multifamily space with retail and commercial at the first floor, the NGBS is available to get the whole building certified, provided that the non-residential space is no more than 49% of the gross floor area. So Home Innovation Research Labs, we are a 57-year-old product testing and certification laboratory located in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, just outside the nation's capital. Our expertise is in the residential construction industry, and we have a diverse team that works on addressing barriers to innovation. Our corporate mission is to improve the quality, durability, affordability, and environmental performance of homes. And one way that we live that mission is through our efforts to expand the market for residential green certification. So Home Innovation serves as the adopting entity or certification body for NGBS certification. And that means that we set the rules of the road, the certification and verification requirements, and we issue certification once we're confident that we have deemed it in compliance. And the way that we do that is that we train, test, and accredit third-party professionals, folks like Graham, to go out and inspect the buildings for compliance. So a multifamily building would undergo 2 inspections of every unit, one pre-drywall and then another at final. What makes NGBS Green Certification different than other programs available? So when we launched the program in 2009, we really took a hard look at the marketplace to understand why residential buildings kind of lagged behind commercial office space in seeking third-party green certification. And we developed a program that was designed to address a lot of those barriers. So first, we saw that cost was an issue for many people. So we worked hard to keep our fees low so we don't pass on high costs to our partners. We also saw that efficiency and speed of decision-making was holding up a lot of folks. So we committed to issuing technical assistance and interpretations within 1 business day. And also we said that provided that we had a complete and accurate verification packet and fees were paid, we would issue certification within 1 business day as well. We were hearing stories about people waiting 3, 4, or 5 months to get their green certificate, That didn't work for the residential sector because those builders needed a certificate in hand for home closing. And then also, as you can imagine, being an organization that's steeped in that third-party laboratory, QA and QC is really part of our program in a huge way. And we bring that to bear with the NGBS Green program. So at this point, I wanted to get a sense of who's on the line. And so you can select multiple options to this poll question. The question is, I work on the following projects. You can say single family new, single family renovation, multifamily new construction, multifamily renovation, neighborhood development, or mixed use properties.
I added one in there just so you know, Cindy. I thought I'd be good to get that information. So
awesome. Appreciate that. Wow, this is a really great mix. It looks like everyone on the line is doing a little bit of everything. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of requests for NGBS are from multifamily, new construction, or renovation. I don't know if we've ever gotten a neighborhood development request, and we get a few single family, but it's largely unknown by homeowners in my experience.
Great. So the NGBS standard is divided into chapters, and if you have the full book, you can look at the complete chapter list. So chapter 2 includes some important definitions. Chapter 3 provides an overview of building compliance. It talks about building eligibility and the different scoring pathways. Chapters 5 through 10 are for new construction of either single family homes or multifamily buildings. And then chapter 11 is for existing buildings. Chapter 13 is that commercial space pathway that I mentioned before. And so in general, chapter 11, the practices are very similar to what's included in chapters 5 through 10 for new construction. And even the numbering is the same, with an 11 preceding the practice number. So for example, 503.4 stormwater management becomes 11503.4 in chapter 11. Where relevant and necessary, the practices have been modified slightly to be applicable to a remodeled building, or the practices might say newly installed systems or features only need to comply. To be eligible to use chapter 11, at least 50% of the structural systems of the existing building must remain in place after the remodel. Otherwise, the building would use chapters 5 through 10 for compliance and be treated as a new construction project. In addition, multifamily buildings that are being renovated, chapter 11 can be used for building conversions. So for example, if a commercial office building is being converted into apartments, they can still use chapter 11 just the same. There's a wide range of activities that would make a building NGBS compliant, from gut rehab to more moderate improvements. The NGBS works exceptionally well for historic preservation because the NGBS doesn't care how the building is more energy or water efficient. You just need to meet the performance targets. So if there's a historic preservation restriction on the facade or the windows, it doesn't matter as long as the energy efficiency target is met. And then depending on the scope of the rehab project, existing buildings can either use the renovation or the new construction compliance paths. Gut rehabs may want to use the new construction path, especially if their local jurisdiction considers the proposed renovations to be new construction for code compliance. Developers, architects, and owners should consider both options and talk about it with their green verifier before they commit. So renovations that include building additions are also eligible. Buildings with additions less than 75% of the original above grade conditioned area can use the renovation path, whereas buildings with more substantial additions must use the new construction path. There is an exception for historic properties, which will just be discussed later. Remodeled buildings must comply with the relevant mandatory practices. In general, the mandatory practices are the same ones as you'll see in the new construction chapters. Unaltered portions of the building are exempt for the mandatory items unless there's safety or moisture issues present. The NGBS has explanatory notes throughout, and there's a lot of notes throughout the renovation chapter for people to help, to help guide you through the chapter. In addition, attributes of the building that comply before the remodel and remain in place are eligible to earn points. And I think that this is a great bonus because and it's green from a bigger picture perspective. So if you have toilets in there already that are fairly efficient and they meet the NGBS practice within the Chapter 11, you don't need to replace them, put in something that's slightly more efficient. It would be greener to keep what's in there already there and not waste that material and transportation to get the new products up there. So at this point, I'll pause, and I wanted to ask Brett if there was any areas that we could clarify in terms of building eligibility.
Yeah, I have one question here on the eligibility side, and that was just in regards to multiple apartment buildings. So for example, if you're doing several different apartments, the question is kind of vague here, but I think I know what the question is it that you can bundle them all into one workbook, or do they have to be separately certified, as I suspect what the question is here?
Yeah, so Chapter 11 is for a whole home or a whole building to be certified. So we'd be looking at the whole building needing to meet the energy and water targets, and then any prescriptive practices would need to be implemented in every single unit. So it's not a great option for smaller projects that might only touch a couple of apartments. However, I will say, like, if you're planning to do a phased renovation where you will touch all of the apartments, but you're just doing it staggered over a couple of years, provided that you can do that all within like a 5-year period, that might be a good option. You might be able to get the building certified.
Well, that's great, because that's not the question they asked, but that is something I wanted to know too. So, but let me ask the question they wanted to ask, which I think is bigger than this, but that was really helpful. So they're talking in this case, I think, about multiple different buildings, like a whole portfolio of buildings. How would you handle that? Would it all be on one checklist if it's all the same, or is that multiple projects in one?
Yeah, and I know Graham's team does a lot of this where there's multi-building projects. And the way we handle it is that the verifier will register the whole project at one time with all the different buildings noted. And then we certify at the building level. So each building needs to be within compliance with the NGBS, and we will issue a certificate for each building.
Now, what about, let's shrink it down to the small scale. I remember at one point there was a program, like if you just wanted to do a small home project, whether it be a weatherization project, which we see a lot, or a bathroom renovation, are those allowed for this, or do you really need to think of the whole home holistically to certify?
Yeah, that's a great question. The 2012 and 2015 versions of the NGBS included a chapter for small projects. So you could do a renovation of a kitchen, a bathroom, a small addition, and certify just that room as being in compliance with the NGBS and get a certificate for the remodel project. We found that that the market really didn't have an appetite for that type of green certification. It really didn't pencil out in terms of dollars and cents for the builders and the verifiers to get out there and get everything completed that needed to be done. And so we've had very, very few of those types of projects certified over the years. And then with the 2020 NGBS, they took that chapter out entirely. So if someone is doing a project like that, where they are, renovating a individual single family home, and they just want to get a green certificate for the kitchen, or if they have a multifamily building and they're just doing upgrades to every single kitchen within every apartment in the building, they could still do that under 2015. It's just not something that we see very often.
Great, thanks. I think that's all we have.
Okay, Great. All right, so there's important differences between the NGBS new construction compliance and the existing building compliance. So the NGBS has 6 categories of green practice: lot design, resource efficiency, energy efficiency, water efficiency, indoor environmental quality, and operations and maintenance. And for a new building to earn certification, the project needs to hit minimum point targets in every category. And then to move up from one level to the other, they need to be higher performing across the board. For renovation, buildings don't need to have that minimum number of points hit in every chapter. Instead, this chapter is looking at, did the building meet the energy use reduction target? Did it meet the water use reduction target? And did it get enough NGBS points from the other categories: lot design, IEQ, O&M, and resource efficiency? For water and energy compliance, there are both performance and prescriptive options, and project teams can mix and match in whatever way best suits them. So this slide shows the certification point requirements for the 4 certification levels. And again, these points are just for lot design, resource efficiency, indoor environmental quality, and operations and maintenance. And they're tallied across those 4 categories. So if a building earns 88 points and can meet the energy and water consumption requirements, they can earn bronze certification. For buildings that want to use the performance path for either energy or water, the project team can work with their verifier to determine the baseline conditions, like the pre-renovation state of the building. And then they can track and analyze the savings as part of the renovation project to show how much energy and water was saved as a result. And this is often done through audit and analysis that involves energy modeling or utility data. And given that the NGBS is structured in this way, where we're really focused on savings rather than bringing the building up to code, there's a great opportunity for older buildings to hit really high levels of certification, like bronze and, like gold and emerald, because they're already so inefficient to start. To use the prescriptive path for energy and water, a building would need to successfully incorporate enough green features to earn enough points to get their desired certification level. Points are assigned in general to equate with the energy savings. So each point within the prescriptive path is approximately 0.5% energy savings. And the water chapter is similarly structured so that higher point practices are aligned with features that offer higher water savings. While each building is different, the performance path compliance is generally better suited for older buildings, and there might be some additional costs for the energy and water modeling. The prescriptive path is likely better for newer buildings. So as I said before, the NGBS works well for building conversions. So for example, if there is an old industrial or commercial building that's being renovated into apartments, these buildings can use either the prescriptive or performance paths for their energy and water compliance. If such a building wants to use the performance path, the baseline conditions are established by reverse engineering the energy and water consumption. So let's consider an old factory that's slated to be 100 apartments. 50 studios and 51 bedroom apartments. The project team would model the building as the same 100 apartments using typical fixtures from the year that the building was last renovated. If the building is very old and no data is available, the project team could use 1980 code levels as a baseline because we know that there are reliable and detailed data from that year. Once the baseline conditions are established, the verifier will compare the expected energy and water use for the proposed design and then calculate the difference. If the project includes an addition, it's important to note that the expected energy and water use can be calculated for the entire building. So in some cases, the project team might want to consider the prescriptive path for compliance for energy and water, or even the new construction route. Because if there is a large addition, might drag them down in terms of that savings calculation. Buildings with a historic designation are exempt from the NGBS mandatory practices for any building portion or feature that can't be altered per the local designation. So for example, if a building is prohibited from changing the windows, the building exempt from those mandatory fenestration requirements. In such instances, the building would use the performance path for compliance, and they would still need to meet the target consumption reductions. So for that example, where the windows can't be changed, the building's energy model must account for the old inefficient windows and make up the energy savings through other practices, systems, or features. And as mentioned, the NGBS requires buildings with additions that are greater than 75% above grade conditioned area to use the new construction path. However, there is an exception if the existing building is historic. The building can use Chapter 11 for renovation and still take advantage of the exemptions for mandatory items in the unaltered portions of the building. The addition would use the new construction compliance path, and it cannot claim exemptions for the mandatory guidelines. So at this point, I've walked you through the NGBS basics and the high-level compliance criteria for the existing buildings chapter. And I'm going to turn it over to Graham, who's going to walk us through those project examples.
Thanks, Cindy. I really appreciate it. As Brett and Cindy both said, I'm Graham Giovagnoli with EcoAchievers. All of our staff are NGBS verifiers. We do a lot of NGBS work across the country, and we're located in Chicago, Illinois. I feel privileged to be able to share our experience with you. Hopefully it can provide some guidance and helpful tips. I thought it'd be helpful just to walk through our process so you know kind of what to expect on a renovation project, because they're slightly different than a new construction project. So during the design phase, we essentially do a design review and a feasibility analysis to see if the scope and the certification is going to work with the goals in mind for the development team. Once that's determined, we'll register the project with Home Innovations. And then we'll go ahead and complete a preliminary scoring spreadsheet based on the plans and the specs, the work scope that they've provided to us. Sometimes it could be very preliminary plans. Sometimes it could be ready to go with some construction drawings or a fully laid out plan. And then we'll follow up with any recommendations after we review those materials. We'll do an initial vetting. So we may go to the site to do a baseline visit, and we'll look for any health and life safety or moisture issues, which we take very seriously. And then we'd flag immediately to make sure that incorporated into the scope would be addressing those issues. And then we have a kickoff meeting to get everybody on the same page. We finalize the measures that they're going to use to either achieve the energy reduction, or if they went the prescriptive route, that we have those measures in place. We will discuss the certification process and the expectations, general expectations, submittals, documentation, and the mandatory requirements. Then we typically perform energy modeling, which to show an improvement that's required for the target certification. Again, Cindy mentioned 15% for bronze, 25, 35, 45 for silver, gold, and emerald, respectively. Energy modeling must be done on a building by building basis. I know Cindy covered that, but if you have a 14 building development, each one of those buildings is required to get that 15% reduction in energy based on those energy and water efficiency measure improvements. We typically go the performance route, as most of our rehab projects are moderate rehabs, or they're of a vintage that might make it hard for them to meet the prescriptive requirements. So for instance, meeting the 2018 IECC and the UA trade-off would be unlikely for a 70s, 80s, or even 90s building. So they couldn't get the 30 prescriptive points and therefore they would have to try to meet those prescriptive requirements in other ways. A lot of the prescriptive requirements in Chapter 7 energy are above code, and so it would also be unlikely that those things would exist in those buildings. So we typically take the energy modeling route to show that energy use reduction. Then we would do an ASHRAE level 2 or possibly ASHRAE level 3 audit. ASHRAE level 3 if no GC were being used on the project. So you're just using local subs and your own resources to complete this rehab. And then draw up a list of energy and water efficiency measure recommendations, produce a SETI score, which is called a Statement of Energy Design Intent, which is required for HUD projects. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that most all of our remodel projects are HUD, so I'm going to kind of be speaking through that lens. We often partner with someone who does a larger volume of ASHRAE reports, and then we take on that verifier role. So we partner and work together in that way. If it's a state funded or a state tax credit project, you wouldn't see an ASHRAE report there. But obviously the energy and water efficiency measure list would need to be created and implemented as well. Okay. Yeah, I said one more thing to say. So at that point, we review and approve the energy and water efficiency measures submittals. We want to make sure that everything's lined up in the beginning. We vetted all of those measures. And then we'll go out and do a rough NGBS visit, even though it isn't technically required if you're not exposing the envelope. We still do it to confirm on site that the energy water efficiency measures that are installed are actually the ones that were planned. And then we do a final NGBS visit at the end, and we review and verify all the measures and the NGBS scope. And then we submit for certification. Okay, thanks, Cindy. Some of the most valuable webinars that I go to are ones where I'm kind of just given nuggets of wisdom. We've learned a lot, sometimes the hard way, on our projects. So I just wanted to share a couple of those with you. HVAC replacement, if you're doing it, you're going to need manual J or S calculations. Learning thermostats are not necessarily the same as smart thermostats. The newest Nest thermostat is not a learning thermostat. So some things to keep in mind if that's one of the energy, water, or the energy conservation measures that you're implementing. Electric baseboards, there's wiring issues. They're not compatible with all smart thermostats. So if you have electric radiant baseboard heat and one of your measures is also smart or learning thermostats, there's very limited thermostats that are going to work with those. The MISA works, MYSA, we found. If you're going to incorporate air sealing measures into the scope to increase the energy efficiency, those can be really hard to implement. Some of the things you need to keep in mind, you'll need to do pre and post blower door testing to test the air infiltration of the units. Then if the units test under 5 ACH or relatively tight, you're going to need 62.2 compliant ventilation. And then you'll also need to test that ventilation. So there's a lot of scope and testing there that maybe you weren't intending on in the first place as part of the remodel. Insulation and air seal inspections are needed when the envelope is exposed, which means there's going to be more site visits for the verifier because they'll have to verify that all of the insulation is NGBS grade 1 install quality. One of the energy or water efficiency measures we often see is thermostatic tub diverters. You want to be careful on the that's the picture on the right. You want to be careful on the lower end because sometimes the lower gallon per minute flows only work with certain tub configurations. And then there might be a minimum flow rate issue with like tankless water heaters or and compatibility there. So it's just something to think about. Condensing water heaters can be tricky and expensive. energy conservation member because of the difficulty and possibly cost of new piping, something to keep in mind. And you want to order enough shower heads. We're doing this one the hard way. You want to order enough shower wands to accommodate extra units or those that want them, like ADA units. Oftentimes the measure will be install 1.5 shower heads, but then they didn't account for a lot of the ADA units or others that wanted them. They don't necessarily, supply is hard to get at the moment. So having some more on hand is helpful. Now let's talk about a couple of the projects that we've worked on and some of their features, the energy water efficiency measures that were included in them. First one is Village of San Domingo. It's in Las Vegas, 1988 vintage. It's 15 two-story buildings. Also has an accessory. They went 2020 NGBS and achieved bronze. They got a 16.2% energy reduction per building. And you can see some of the features that were implemented or measures that were implemented. So this is kind of your standard garden style projects. The reason that they were able to these kinds of results with just water fixtures and lighting is because their SETI score was already pretty high. It was in the 70s. And for a HUD loan, you need a SETI score of 75 or better. So they were already pretty close. And so these things pushed them over the edge, and they were able to qualify for the 15% energy reduction, which is required for NGBS. The opportunity is obviously that the owner is able to update, give the property a facelift while simultaneously reducing the energy usage, both for the occupant and them, the owner. The challenge here is residential buildings and accessory structures need to have modeling on a building by building basis. So if you have different building vintages on the same property as part of the same remodel, they might not have the same scope. You may have new appliances and lighting in one of the newer buildings. It still has, if you want it certified, it still has to achieve that 15% reduction, or you could go the prescriptive route. You can mix and match. There might be upgrades are weighted in different buildings. So you're heavily weighted in one building as opposed to another. That reduction has to be in every building. And then the clubhouse, if you want it certified, which is a requirement, our understanding is a requirement of HUD, the clubhouse might already be updated or might not have the same features capable of being updated. On the energy side, these examples are like lighting and appliances. Maybe you're keeping up in the clubhouse and everything's new and up to date. How are you going to achieve that reduction? And on the water side, clubhouses or accessory structures might not contain clothes washers, showers, irrigation, things like that. Yeah, Cindy, thank you. The next project, can you advance? Thanks. The next project is the Element, little higher end. It's in New Jersey. It was built in 2019. Here, an energy use reduction was achieved about 22%. Water reduction was 20%. The interesting thing to note about this particular project is the challenge. So it's less than 5 years old, which means that it's going to be locked out of the 2020 remodel certification. So we chose to go the 2015 NGBS, and there we have to go performance-based, but how do we achieve a 15% energy reduction or more in a building that's basically new? And the answer there is a solar PV. So that's typically the answer to get that reduction. So this is a great opportunity as we move closer to building decarbonization or electrification for projects like this. Let's go to the next project. The next one is the Enclave. This one's in California, 1965. This one's interesting because it was a bridge to HUD loan. So they set this project up knowing that they were going to apply for a HUD loan in the future, and wanted to have a certification in place now so that when they go to apply for that loan, everything is in place. So challenge again here is achieving 50% energy use reduction with a very limited scope. Again, the answer is solar PV. You can also see that they installed low flow fixtures, replaced refrigerators, and generally gave the project a facelift, needed facelift. So, and that concludes my portion. Now we can open it up to questions.
Hey, great, everyone. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Cindy. Can you all hear me all right here?
Sounds good.
Yeah, you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Yeah, so we do have some time for questions. And before we get into those questions, just real quick here, for those of you who are listening to this in the future and on demand, you're going to want to take your 10-question quiz with an 80% passing rate, either on the GBCI channel or on our Thinkific channel. So hopefully you can see that now. So make sure to take that. That's not those of you listening live right now, but for in the future, make sure to take that. And then also, for those of you listening live right now, just a reminder, check out your spam and mark safe, search at gutenbergsafe.com. As long as you've attended at least 50 minutes of our session, you're approved for the CEUs. So you'll automatically get that sent from them. So check that out in your spam and you'll be able to get it that way. So, and before we get on to those questions, as always, a huge thanks to our board of directors, all of our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reina, and all of our volunteer speakers and our top tier sponsors, Mitsubishi Electric, Rheem, Apple Air, Build Equinox. They're all there to help achieve these goals, right? It's all about achieving sustainability and decarbonization. And so they're there to help. Check them out if you want to learn more. So yeah, I guess let's just kind of get to the elephant in the room question. It's been asked a couple times and it's going to be asked and it's always asked. And I know that when we get to the question of cost, there are diversion. There's the cost of to the organization, the entity, Home Innovations Lab, and those the registration and certification fees, as we call them in the LEED world anyway. And then there's the raters, right? And then there's a diversion between green and energy raters sometimes, and you're paying them differently. And then sometimes there's also the consultants, which do occur and other times don't occur, and it just depends. And so maybe we can just talk in general, especially Cindy, you can just talk a little bit through some of the basic fees on the renovation side for certification. And then Graham, I know you can only speak to broadly, right? And it's always subjective, but what kind of fees are we seeing out there for the raters? And we know that ultimately the raters are being paid the most, right? They're the ones doing all the work. They're the feet on the street. And so I don't know if there's, rough numbers you all can say. But yeah, let's just talk, briefly about some of these, not the hard costs, but the sort of soft certification fees.
Yeah, so for NGBS Green Certification, there's no registration fee. The registration step is free but mandatory. It just gets the projects in so we can provide assistance sooner. And then our certification fees are fairly affordable. So for a single family home, it's $200 per home. And then for multifamily, it's either $300 or $600, depending on the height of the building, and then $30 per unit. In addition to the certification fees, of course, they're going to be paying their verification costs as well. And those will range depending on what's in scope for the verifier team. They might be doing the energy modeling in addition to the verification. They might be doing some additional training or marketing support. It really depends on how the verifier companies have structured their fee schedules. So I always encourage like a developer, if they're getting started, to reach out to a couple different verifiers that work in their state. For multifamily, the person who's closest isn't always the best option. You really want someone who has multifamily experience. And I think for existing buildings, it's really important to have someone who works with Graham, who has that existing building experience under his or her belt. And all the credit verifiers are listed on our website, and you can search by state. Graham, would you want to chime in with anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the major distinctions between LEED projects and those that are going to get a HERS certification is performance testing. So whereas you can certainly get points for performance testing in NGBS, it's not required. And so for LEED, you're going to be subjected to ventilation testing and blower door testing and duct testing, direct venting, kitchen exhaust hoods, things like that, which is going to rack up site visits and obviously more work and more performance metrics that you need to meet. So like Brett said, it's very hard to say this is X amount of dollars more, but your average project, apples to apples, is more, maybe double, NGBS to LEED on the fees, on the rater fees side.
Sorry, thank you. Cindy, earlier you stated that there's you get to pick between new or existing, and then later you sort of went into describing, well, if the building requires 75% or more, that you need to you need to go with the new side, but when there's historical. So I guess my question is not necessarily to go down that rabbit hole, but why would someone pick new if they could go with existing? It seems like there would be a lot more work. Would there be any advantage to picking new?
It might just be easier to communicate with the local permit office if they've already deemed it as new construction for code compliance. That way, if they're getting a certificate that says this renovated building is certified, it's not causing any raised eyebrows. I think for the most part, they're going to be having the same technical requirements, whether they're doing prescriptive path for renovation or for new building. Graham, are you thinking of something that I'm not?
No, it might be a little easier to, if you're going for a higher certification, there might be more options available to you on the new construction side, because if you have a gut renovation or something along those lines, then you could take advantage of some of the points on the upper levels, if that's something that the project is seeking. That would be one of the benefits I would think about. But otherwise, if it's a renovation, I would go the renovation route, and yeah.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about energy. First, one of the questions is the tools you use to determine on the performance side. What are they? I know most programs require the HERS index rating, or now the ERI. I know for single family homes, we have something called the Department of Energy Home Energy Score, which is a great tool. There's WUFI. What are the ones that you allow or require for folks to make informed decisions and take the performance pathway?
Yeah, so for the energy path, we require some documentation, either the energy model or a collection of the utility bills, plus the analysis. So if they're doing, and it's on a whole building basis. So we want a whole building energy model, and then some detailed notes, typically in an Excel spreadsheet, and we provide a template that they can use, but it's optional if someone has their own proprietary tool that they've created that covers the same key categories as our tool, that's fine. We have a lot of flexibility. For the energy analysis, we're looking for a total energy savings per square foot based on the whole square footage of the building. And then for water, we don't require like additional documentation. We're looking for a completed calculator that shows the water savings. And we have a tool that has a lot of built-in information. So if they don't know the efficiency of the toilets that were there previously, or it was a situation like an industrial loft building that's recently been converted and had been gutted previously, you don't know the flow rates, flush volumes. We have a lot of historic information that can help somebody build up that historic baseline for the before conditions.
Yeah, I just want to make one distinction there. If it's a building 3 stories and under, and it's very simple, very maybe no corridors, just stairways, things like that, we might use REM-rate or Ecotrope and do unit modeling to calculate that reduction. If it's a mixed use building or it's larger than 3 stories, then we're going to be using some, commercial energy modeling software like eQuest or,
90.1 really, right?
Yeah, something that's capable of a 90.1. But, and also a really important distinction there also is if it's a smaller building and you still want to use REM-rate or Ecotrope, if it's got a large amount of commercial space or common space, you're going to need to use commercial energy modeling software in order to do those commercial spaces or large common spaces.
Yep, great additions.
Well, Cindy, I'm really glad you brought up water, and I'm going to get back to that in a second here because it's relevant to the next question. But I've always found what cool about this project and the projects we've seen is that sort of biggest loser approach, right? So when buildings are in really terrible shape, and it was sort of one of the questions that came through, but I didn't quite understand the question, so I'm going to try my best. But when buildings are in really terrible shape, this is a great opportunity for them, especially. But I assume the same thing on water, though I want to clarify that in a second. But what if buildings are in really good shape? And that was one concern I've had. Like, what if they're just doing really well, and for whatever reason there's an incentive, or they just want to certify because it's the right thing, or maybe energy is not their concern, maybe they're looking at health and the other aspects of green, and they want that certification. What is it that they would do if they're already in really good shape? Is it prescriptive? Is that the answer?
Yeah, so remember I said that if there are features in the building that already are in compliance, they can get points for that. So if there's specific prescriptive features like good windows, good insulation in the walls, like I would say go through the prescriptive part of the checklist and see how it would score if it can reach the minimum number of points for prescriptive energy, prescriptive water, see what's achievable going down that road.
And one of the requirements on the prescriptive side, if you're going to take that route, is making sure that it's compliant to IECC 2018. So a really quick check could be to go do a res check or a com check, enter your inputs and see if you're better than code there, because that's kind of the gateway to the next portion.
Yeah, good point. So it sounds like we can do that same thing with water. And, Cindy, when we had you on late last year for the water rating index webinar, which I'm going to post a link here for everyone to grab, I believe you told me we couldn't do remodels, but maybe you were working on fixing that. So has that been resolved and remodels are now allowed to use that?
So the distinction is that for the performance path for water efficiency, it's different for new construction and for renovation. So for a new construction project, there's prescriptive and performance options for water compliance. The performance path is the water rated index, where a building is getting a 0 to 100 score based on the efficiency of the building and the lot. For renovation, WRI or water rating index is not available. So we're looking for that percent savings compared to before conditions. That might change. I mentioned at the beginning that we're opening up for comments for the 2024 NGBS. I think that's a great suggestion if somebody did want to use WRI for a renovated building. There's no reason somebody couldn't suggest it and have it be considered by the committee.
I see. So you still have that built-in feature where you have the pre and post, and it's not the WRI tool that you're using to derive
Exactly.
that. Okay, gotcha. But it's still the same idea where you're looking at water conservation through a performance lens.
Yeah, yeah. I don't need to go into the weeds with WRI, but for WRI, you are comparing against a baseline, but it's like a reference home based on some basic features like size configurations of your property.
Mhm. Okay.
And also keep in mind that you can take the prescriptive route for water and you can take the energy, the performance route for energy. So you can mix and match. Two of the projects that I went over took the prescriptive route for water. So, you spec 1.2 faucet or lavatory faucets. And so you can attain the points prescriptively there.
So here's kind of a good question. I mean, it's really about projects that aren't doing any renovation work at all and want to take more of an operation and sort of maintenance approach. I guess I assume they're sort of pulling ideas here from one of LEED's programs. Do you see a viable path for that? Is there anything like that coming in the future that you can speak to?
Yeah, this is really timely because we recently met with a group of verifiers and kicked this idea around a little bit. I think this was driven in part because there is at least one jurisdiction in our local area in the DC region that is offering a really big incentive for existing buildings, but they're only referencing LEED O&M, and that's not really a program that's geared toward residential. And so we're working to communicate how this is, similar, but has the same philosophy at the core of, existing buildings are improving. I think when we met with the verifiers and talked about an O&M type certification, they thought there could be a little bit of an appetite, but the market wasn't quite ready for that. What they thought might be more appealing is like a recertification kind of 5 years out. And then after that 5-year recertification, they would be kind of kicked to the existing buildings path for like a full certification.
Got it. Yeah. And I guess just to be fair to LEED before O&M is really, you're right, it is not very well put together for homes, residential. But I will say I commend them on 4.1, but they just haven't balloted that yet. So it's out there. It's in this weird state of uncertainty. So anyway, some other questions that came in here. How do I become a verifier? What do I need to do?
Yeah, so I can send our verifier candidate handbook to anyone who's interested. That kind of details the process for getting your application in and getting into the training. So we look for individuals who already have some training or experience in green building, such as like a LEED Green Associate, HERS Rater, Energy Star Writer type credential already, and then some experience with residential construction. They'll submit like a resume and cover letter. We'll review that, make sure they meet our prerequisites, and then we get them into our training to get trained up on the NGBS and the verification protocol. The fee is $250, and there are trainings for each of the specific NGBS versions. So we want our verifiers to get trained on the 2015 and then the 2020 and then the 2024 so that they're familiar with the new practices that are included. Anything else related to, the verifier training that you want me to touch on?
Well, I was just going to say, I know the LEED Green Rater course is one of the potential prerequisites, not the only, but so we have one coming up. So I posted a link in that, but maybe Graham, obviously you probably took it a while ago, but what is one key studying or thing someone should know to pass the test, right? I know everyone gets test anxiety. I do too. So
the materials that Home Innovation Research Labs provides are excellent. I would say that the best study guide is the one that's provided. There are 4 or 5 videos, and things are laid out very clearly. It was a great training experience. As far as the prerequisite goes, HRL, Home Innovation Research Labs, requires you to really be involved and already have the construction acumen and the understanding of verification principles and things like that. So I would say if you're brand new, you may want to cut your teeth a little before, because you're expected to, to be in the industry.
So, but there's no mentorship required, right? Like some programs require a mentoring period or phase.
We do have a field rep option. So if someone's more green and can't meet the prerequisites to become a full verifier, they could come in as a field rep, which means that they can be contracted by a verifier to do some of the energy and water verification, and then get access to be a full verifier after some time once they've had some experience under their belt.
Yeah, and if you really just want to jump in, the BPI Building Science Principles course might be something. You mentioned Lead Green Raider, so I suppose maybe that would be a prerequisite course if you just were rogue, gung-ho, you wanted to charge forward.
I know there's a program out there called the Certified Green Professional or Master's Green Builder from NHAB. I've always looked at that as sort of the equivalent of the LEED AP to this program, but the difference being there's no connection from points or anything. It's just my closest, like trying to wrap my brain around how things connect, right? Like I know it might not be, I kind of saw you shaking your head. Is there anything else out there like that that's coming that's sort of the similar to like the consultant side for this program?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because we just rolled out NGBS Green Pro, which is a new designation, not for verifiers, but for everyone else. So it's applicable for builders, developers, real estate agents, government officials, architects, anyone who's involved with the industry that just wants the basics on what is the NGBS Green program and what are the key components. So I would say that is more akin to like a LEED AP than the NAHB Certified Green Professional, which does not reference NGBS Green Certification. It just talks about the basic building science principles and the NGBS standard. We just recently rolled out the NGBS Green Pro, and I think it's really exciting. And I can give a little discount code for anyone who emails me afterward asking about it.
Great. Going back to cost a little bit, I know we got a lot of designers and architects on, and I know they always have a lot of concerns as to how much work they need to put in to make these things happen. And sometimes it's looked at differently. Other times it's like, hey, this is part of what I already do. It's normal. And we want to help more of you get to that level where this is just normal, right? Green building is part of your design and spec. But also you still, inevitably, there's always work that needs to be done. Have either of you heard any kind of feedback or conversation on this person is asking for a specific percentage, right? Like, what do I increase my cost by? But, can you speak to that at all a little bit on what you see or hear out there?
Graham, do you have a rule of thumb or a estimated range of hours that you would give for like the documentation and analysis part?
Yeah, I didn't understand the question, Brett. Are you saying how much more of a cost implication is NGBS than a standard?
On the architect
project
side, right? So like what additional work can they be expected to have to do that maybe they weren't doing on the code side? Just going for a building code anyway.
Yeah. A lot of the mandatory, especially the mandatory requirements in NGBS are a standard building practice. So, there's a certain amount of admin time in vetting, the requirements and making sure that they get into the plans. I don't know how much time, we're certainly not an architecture firm, but, we have meetings with them, I don't know, somewhere on the range of 5 to 10 hours. You can expect we make it as painless as possible. So other than like the kickoff calls and the making sure that things get in plans, we, as the verifier, we kind of provide all the materials and requirements for the architect so that they get into the plan set and process. And then we handle everything on the verification and builder side, registration, scoring spreadsheets. So there's not a whole lot more, which is why I think NGBS is so valuable. It's very flexible, it's very approachable and easy to work with, which is why we like working with it, why we recommend it, and why others are asking us to work with it. So it's not that much bigger to lift.
Yeah, it's just harder to put to pinpoint something for existing buildings because they can range so great. It could be a little bit of a facelift, or it could be a total gut rehab, and they're going to take a different amount of folks' time.
Yeah, good point there. Well, we are a little over our time, but I appreciate you both sticking around and answering some of these questions and having this conversation. And I guess just real quick, was there anything else you wanted to bring up or add? And then after that, maybe if both of you could just mention where people could contact you to learn more, find these resources, or reach out if they want to start a project.
Yeah, I'll speak if that's okay. You can contact me at the email there, or you can go to our website, ecoachievers.com. It's very simple. And shameless plug, we talked about requirements. We are hiring. There's a lot of green certification building going on. So if you have any construction background, modeling background, or just love to travel and make the world a better place, email me.
Great. Yeah, I encourage people that have joined today to download the 2020 NGBS and take a look at the existing building requirements. You can also go to our website at homerenovation.com/green scoring, download the 2015 and the 2020 renovation scoring spreadsheets and take a closer look. You're going to find all of our green resources on our website at homerenovation.com/green, and people can email me or call me if they want to talk through some things in more detail.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Graham, Eco Achievers, one of our longtime members, and always love seeing and working with you all. And Cindy, Home Innovations, thanks for all the work, programs you're putting together and everything that you do. Stay safe, be well out there. We all want to see you in person someday. We love doing webinars. We're always going to do them, but we do want to see you in person. We do want to get back to that someday soon. So we got to use building science. We got to ventilate, filter the air, and I think we can beat this thing among many other things. So stay safe, be well, take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.